What if everything you thought you knew about history was a lie? From emperors staging miracles to empires rewriting the truth, these are the top 10 biggest lies in history that fooled entire nations, destroyed reputations, and in some cases, started wars. Stick around, because the higher we go on this list, the wilder it gets. Number 10. Vikings wore horned helmets. You've seen the Halloween costumes, the TV shows, the heavy metal album covers, giant Viking warriors charging into battle, rocking horned helmets like fashion statements from Valhalla. Except that image is a total fabrication. There is zero historical evidence that real Vikings wore horned helmets in battle. Not one has ever been found in archaeological digs. So where did the horns come from? Blame 19th century opera. In 1876, a costume designer for Wagner's Ring Cycle opera wanted something dramatic, so he slapped horns on the helmets of Norse characters, and boom, a meme was born, a myth solidified. The actual Vikings were more likely to wear simple leather or iron headgear, more function than flair. So the next time you see a Viking costume at Comic-Con, just know history is silently judging. Number 9. The Trojan horse was totally real. Or was it? The Greeks couldn't breach the mighty walls of Troy, so they pulled the oldest trick in the book. Build a giant wooden horse, hide some soldiers inside, gift it to the Trojans, and sneak in once everyone's asleep. Classic. But historians are now asking, did this actually happen? Spoiler alert, probably not. The earliest accounts of the Trojan War, like Homer's Iliad, don't even mention the horse. That came later in Roman sources, centuries after the supposed war. Some scholars think the horse was symbolic, possibly an earthquake. Poseidon was god of both horses and quakes, or even a siege engine that was nicknamed the horse. Others believe it was total mythology, born from a blend of oral traditions and nationalistic storytelling. So if the Trojan horse wasn't real, then that means one of the most iconic war tactics in history was basically ancient fan fiction. Number 8. The Great Wall is visible from space. You've heard this one since grade school. The Great Wall of China is the only man-made object you can see from space. It's a cool fact. Too bad it's completely wrong. Let's clarify. If you're in low Earth orbit with ideal lighting and a pair of binoculars, maybe you can spot it. But so can you spot highways, airports, and even city blocks. From the moon, though, forget it. Astronauts have consistently reported that the wall is indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape. So where did this lie come from? It started as early as the 1930s, before we even went to space. People just assumed something so massive and ancient had to be visible from orbit. It was a catchy, fun fact that stuck. Ironically, other man-made structures like cities glowing at night, or even airports, are much more visible from space than the wall. So this only object visible from space myth, it's just another case of human ego stretching the truth. Number 7. Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake. The French are starving, the people are rioting, and the Queen hears of it and says, 'Let them eat cake.' How deliciously evil." Except she never said that. There's no record of Marie Antoinette ever uttering those words. In fact, the phrase appeared in literature before she was even queen, written by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who credited it to an unnamed princess. So why blame Marie? She was an unpopular foreigner in a collapsing regime. When people wanted someone to blame for poverty and inequality, they pinned it on the most glittery target. It was a perfect soundbite, a snobby royal, totally out of touch. The phrase helped spark outrage and revolution, becoming an iconic example of class divide, all based on a lie. Ironically, by the time the mob stormed Versailles, she had already cut back on luxuries and was trying to reform. But history doesn't care. A good villain quote is worth more than the truth. Number 6. Columbus discovered America. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered a continent already full of millions of people. Indigenous civilizations like the Aztecs, the Iroquois, the Mayans, thriving long before Columbus showed up. And even if we're talking Europeans, he still wasn't first. The Viking explorer Leif Erikson landed in what's now Canada nearly 500 years earlier. But here's the twist. Columbus never even stepped foot in North America. He mostly bounced around the Caribbean, places like the Bahamas, Cuba, and Hispaniola. So how did he end up in every elementary school textbook? Thank U.S. nationalism. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Columbus was repackaged as a brave symbol of exploration and destiny. Statues went up, parades were held, and inconvenient facts were edited out. The truth: Columbus didn't discover America. He launched a centuries-long wave of conquest, colonization, and catastrophe. And the whole hero-explorer thing, that was the spin job of the century. Number 5. Napoleon was short. Napoleon Bonaparte, brilliant general, emperor of France, and famously short, at least that's what the jokes say, but this one's a total historical hit piece. Napoleon was around 5'7", which was actually average height for a Frenchman in the early 1800s. So where did the tiny tyrant image come from? Two main reasons. 1. French inches were longer than British inches, so when British newspapers reported his height, it looked smaller than it really was. 2. British propaganda. Cartoonists loved mocking Napoleon as a stubby little rage monster. It was easier to insult the man if he was made to look ridiculous. The Napoleon complex, invented long after he died. In reality, he was a respected strategic genius who towered in presence even if not literally in height. So yeah, the guy who conquered most of Europe wasn't undone by being short, he was undone by a disastrous Russian winter. Number 4. Nero fiddled while Rome burned. The year is 64 AD, Rome is engulfed in flames, and Emperor Nero, he's casually playing the fiddle while his city burns to ashes. At least, that's the legend. Here's the truth, violins didn't even exist for another 1,400 years. Oh, and Nero, he wasn't even in the city when the fire started, he was miles away at his villa, and when he returned, records show he organized relief efforts, opened his palaces to the homeless, and helped fund rebuilding. So why the smear campaign? Political enemies. After Nero died, Roman historians, especially ones who despised him, wrote stories painting him as a heartless, artsy lunatic. It made for better drama. The fiddling likely comes from misinterpretation of a phrase about him singing a poem during the fire, so the real question isn't why did Nero fiddle, it's why do we still believe he did? Number 3. The emptiness of the Middle Ages. They're called the Dark Ages for a reason, right? 1,000 years where nothing happened, just plague, superstition, and people thinking the earth was flat, except almost none of that is true. The term Dark Ages was coined during the Renaissance by scholars who wanted to make their era look smarter by comparison, but during the so-called Middle Ages, Europe saw massive innovations like universities, windmills, mechanical clocks, and even early capitalism. The Islamic world was flourishing in science and philosophy. China invented gunpowder and the compass. And no, people didn't think the earth was flat. That myth was added much later to make medieval folks sound dumb. The Middle Ages weren't dark, they were just different, and later generations rewrote them as backwards to feel superior. Turns out, the real lie was the Renaissance PR campaign. Number 2. The war to end all wars. World War I, the trenches, the gas attacks, the horror, and when it finally ended in 1918, people called it the war to end all wars. But that wasn't a prediction. It was a lie. The phrase was popularized by writers and politicians, like US President Woodrow Wilson, to sell the public on the idea that this one war could bring permanent peace. But within 20 years, the world was plunged into an even bigger war, with more death, destruction, and a brand new weapon, the atomic bomb. So what happened? The Treaty of Versailles punished Germany so harshly that it fueled the rise of Hitler and the Nazi regime. Far from ending war, World War I practically guaranteed another one. The phrase was powerful. It gave people hope. But in the end, it was just propaganda with a short expiration date. Number 1. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It was the lie that launched a war. After September 11th, US officials claimed that Iraq's Saddam Hussein was stockpiling weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, and possibly even nuclear. The evidence, sketchy intelligence, vague reports, and some downright forged documents. But the narrative worked. In 2003, the US invaded Iraq. Thousands of troops were deployed. Over 100,000 Iraqi civilians lost their lives. And guess what? No WMDs were ever found. By 2004, US investigations confirmed it. Iraq had no active WMD program. The war was built on a lie, one that destabilized the Middle East, gave rise to ISIS, and cost trillions of dollars. And yet, to this day, some still believe those weapons were real. Because when the stakes are high, the truth is often the first casualty. From ancient myths to modern warfare, lies have shaped our world more than we'd like to admit. But here's the thing, once you start asking questions, history becomes more than just dates and names. It becomes a battlefield of truth. So if this blew your mind, smash that like button and drop a comment below. And hey, if you want more dark secrets from the past, you know what to do.